Welcome back to more Sonic Lost World. Last time we suffered through the rest of the Frozen Factory, so this time we're starting with Silent Forest Zone 2.
Sigh, everything seems so pointless.
Hey, what did you do with Tails?
What? Seriously? We captured you.
You wish! You grabbed my friend and I want him back!
Man, this day keeps getting lamer and lamer. Whatever. I gotta go tell the others the bad news. Giving bad news is actually the one thing I enjoy. I'll deal with you later, loser.
And we have the fifth member of the Deadly Six, Zor, who obviously is the emo one of the group. Now that we've seen all six, I think it's safe to say that the Deadly Six are among my least favorite video game villains ever. Once again, I feel like the game tries so hard to make these characters funny, and to me, none of these jokes land, because they rely so much on one-note stereotypes. Even as juvenile as Sonic Colors' writing is, I even think that game's jokes are better, because at the very least, they don't punch down as much as this game's jokes. In general, I just find the writing of this game to be an absolute mess, and that actually makes it one of my least favorite Sonic games. There are obviously objectively worse Sonic games in a lot of ways, like Sonic and the Secret Rings, which barely functions in terms of its controls, but because of its story being so off-putting to me, I think Lost World is genuinely one of the least fun Sonic games I've ever played. In general, the Sonic fandom seems very split into different camps. Obviously, you have 2D, modern, and adventure, but within the 3D categories, you also have a focus on the story and a focus on gameplay as other causes for splits. So for example, a lot of people debate which is better between Sonic Colors and Sonic Unleashed. People who like the tone and overall vibe of Unleashed like it more, while also admitting that some of the gameplay can feel a little bit padded and overly frustrating at times. Meanwhile, Colors is an easier game to play, but the story is a lot worse, so these two games in particular tend to have a lot of debates over which is actually better. In a lot of ways, I think Colors is the more immediately playable game because it's a lot shorter and has less padding, but its story is a lot less enjoyable, so in a lot of ways Unleashed stands out more by having a more serious and grounded story while still retaining a lot of the charm in the writing for characters like Sonic. I feel like the problem with Colors through Forces is the writing tries way too hard to be funny rather than having Sonic just be kind of quippy and irreverent to what's happening. It basically tries to inject humor into everything, and that gets old really fast. But again, I just feel like this game has the worst humor because it's trying to punch down at various stereotypes. We essentially have a stealth sequence here. I am not a fan of this, obviously. I definitely feel like in a Sonic game, it doesn't really fit. We also have the magenta wisp here, which basically allows us to hop across these little planes. In the Wii U version, you have to use the touchscreen, but obviously in this version, we just mash A, which is a lot less interesting, to be honest, but it's obviously a lot easier. Again, in the Wii U version and the PC version without modding, the game will stop you every time you use a wisp. Basically, it'll have a little pop-up saying the wisp is depleted, and also a pop-up when you first activate the power that explains how it works. In the PC version, being able to mod it out is really nice because a lot of times it just feels like a pace breaker, and in a case like this, it's also very self-explanatory how it works. It also makes more sense in the Wii U version, given that you'll have to look back and forth between two screens, while in this version, that's not really a problem, so in general, I like the ability to turn that off, even if it is through modding in this case.
Think of it, what am I still doing here? I should just crawl back in.
I definitely mistimed that jump, but that's okay, we did hit a checkpoint not too long ago. We also have these owls here that'll also help to block the spotlights, but obviously they'll move out of the way eventually, so we definitely want to keep moving still. My problem was I tried to jump and mistimed it. Basically we have to wait until we can actually homing attack these. We can only attack the heads of these dragonfly-looking robots, so that was my problem. And basically we're trying to make a way to the owl over there to try to fight Zor. We actually get the red rings in this stage really early on, which is interesting to me.
I suppose we're gonna have to fight.
This fight is not that difficult. Basically, we have to wait for these orbs to get close enough to us, and then kick them into Zor. Overall, this isn't too difficult, it's more time-consuming than anything. We knocked them off with Owl, so now we can deal some damage. Again, we want to wait for it to lock on, in theory, or sometimes the game will say, no, you can't lock on more than once. So again, I do find this incredibly frustrating, to be honest, how inconsistent the lock-on can be. Though to be fair, this might be a fight where you're actually only supposed to be able to lock onto Zor once. I actually don't know if that's the case or not. If we're able to multi-target Zor, let's see if it happens this time. Nope, so I guess we're only supposed to single target. So instead of being based on damage, I suppose this one's more based around cycles. So it's probably a traditional like 3 to 4 wave fight rather than being based on the amount of health he has. It is very inconsistent how these fights can work sometimes, but this should be the last hit in theory.
We're all doomed anyway.
Next is Zone 3.
And now, Sonic, it's time for... how come he's not blue? You incompetent fools! I cannot trust you with the simplest of tasks. All right, we can work this to our advantage.
Somebody messed up royally because we don't have Sonic.
We know!
I definitely feel like a few scenes kind of work. Like that scene in particular is kind of okay, but again, it is a shame to me that the dynamic between Sonic and Tails is one of my least favorite parts, and frankly the cutscenes of them by themselves are a lot more enjoyable. When the friendship between Sonic and Tails is one of my favorite parts of the series when done well, this is just a case where they just bicker the entire time, so it's done extremely poorly. Once again, the theming of these worlds is fairly loose, so we have an ice underground stage, which is very not jungly or foresty in this case. Also, we don't have a lot of poison to deal with, unlike the rest of this world. So yeah, in general, the theming is very odd, but again, we are still kind of continuing the trend of having level themes in common with the new Super Mario Bros. Games, which definitely doesn't feel like a coincidence. Again, in a lot of ways, this game just feels kind of bland and derivative. To tell the truth, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. I thought I was supposed to go up, but I guess I somehow missed a spring, so that was very unfortunate. We have this robot here, we have to attack it in one orientation, obviously, because otherwise we'll hit spikes. We also have this green goo, which will slow us down as we try to dodge all of these boulders coming at us. But yeah, in general, the gameplay is fine. There are a few levels that obviously the level gimmicks are very frustrating, but in general, the level design isn't my problem. It actually feels better than other Sonic games from this era, like obviously Forces, where you have very linear stages. These are a lot more open-ended and feel more like traditional Sonic stages as a result. Again, my sole issue with this game is basically the story, and also just the lack of originality in things, and that causes the levels to feel a little bit drier than they might otherwise, just because these are so obviously themed after Mario levels. And again, with the gravity mechanics and the shifting perspectives and everything, it just kind of feels like unabashedly trying to capitalize on the success of Super Mario Galaxy. Also worth mentioning, this game was partially exclusive to the Wii U because Sega and Nintendo actually had a contract at this point to basically have, I think, 4 Sonic games as Wii U and 3DS exclusives. 2 of them were Olympic games, Rio 2016 and Sochi 2014. And the other one, obviously, is very notorious. It's Sonic Boom, which was not meant for Wii U, but then was awkwardly repurposed for this console. So let's finish up this world with Zone 4.
Look at him all, I'm so fast and stuff. Ugh, makes me sick. Time to knock him down a peg.
I guess now is also a good time to mention that I actually think the voice cast of this era of Sonic was actually really impressive. For example, half of the Deadly Six are voiced by half of the members of Critical Role. You have Travis Willingham as both Knuckles and Zavok, Liam O'Brien is Zaz, and Sam Riegel is Zor. But again, it just feels like a lot of very popular and talented voice actors in this era of Sonic really didn't get a whole lot to do in terms of overall, like, the quality of the writing, I feel. And that is something I feel with a lot of Sonic media. Oftentimes you have very competent voice actors, and I feel like this about the 4Kids era, actually. And I kind of came around to a lot of the cast. Obviously, as an adventure fan growing up, I was very skeptical of the recast and definitely had strong opinions as a kid. But over time, I kind of realized that, yeah, the 4Kids cast is really talented when they're given a script that actually is good, which is not necessarily the case in a 4Kids dub, for example, or in some of the other Sonic games like Shadow the Hedgehog obviously doesn't have the best scripting. But a lot of the 4Kids actors were very talented at the time. And that still goes for this dub too, where a lot of the voice talent is very good, it's just they didn't get much to work with. And frankly, a lot of them left shortly after this. Again, like Kate Higgins would only voice Sonic in this, or would only voice Tails in Colors, this, and the short for Colors Ultimate before release, and then someone else would voice Tails starting with Boom, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who I always remember for Genus from Tales of Symphonia, actually. It's also worth mentioning that with, Omochao in this game, you might have seen them around the overworld a bit. I don't think they have any lines in this game, but for example, Omochao in Generations is voiced by Laura Bailey, so you have another Critical Role member, actually. And yeah, basically, it feels like with so many Critical Role people in this game, a lot of them just kind of stopped doing voice roles like this after a certain point. Obviously, you know, Laura Bailey being a good example, ending up in, like, The Last of Us 2, for example, as divisive as that role is. In general, it just feels like, and also like Sonic, for example, is Roger Craig Smith, who also is well known for voicing Chris Redfield in Resident Evil. Every time you have a boulder in this game, I can't help but think of that tidbit, to be honest. But we have a little drill section here to talk about the gameplay a little bit. We have to basically hit all the little orbs on these little devices to activate to access the next path. And once again, we have these little jumps with the Drill Wisp, which actually feels kind of scary, but luckily that worked out. We should have a very interesting section coming up soon, or maybe it's actually after this. Again, I don't really remember a lot of some of these stages, but I do remember one set piece in particular of this zone. And we have a silhouette section, which again, given that we had a minecart-esque sequence earlier, it definitely feels like they're trying to basically take Donkey Kong Country Returns' silhouette level concept, and also merge it with the lever system in Sandopolis Zone from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Obviously, one annoying thing is it can be hard to tell which bombs you're supposed to kick and which ones you're supposed to avoid in the dark. Obviously, you can only lock on to the ones that you can actually kick. So in general, that makes it not too bad, but it can be a little bit frustrating just having to kind of figure it out without being able to actually see what's going on. I think we're getting pretty close to Zor, though. I don't remember this level being particularly long. so I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, in general, I do feel like Eggman has some of the best voice acting from Mike Pollock, actually, but I almost feel like Eggman doesn't belong in this game, or this version of Eggman doesn't belong in this game. It's kind of like if you took, say, the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and put the SatAM Eggman or Robotnik into that. It would feel a little bit jarring because of a tonal disconnect. Eggman... As I was saying, Eggman feels very serious compared to everything else in this game, like literally threatening to strangle the Zeddy earlier, and that just really contrasts how jovial and silly and irreverent the rest of the dialogue is, and it definitely clashes, in my opinion, in a way that definitely stands out very negatively. A lot of people do like Lost World though, and again, I feel like it largely is because the gameplay is actually pretty solid, but again, as someone who actually does like the Sonic writing, the Sonic games with better writing, and tends to actually prioritize that aspect of the franchise, I definitely feel like this is one of my least favorite Sonic games. Again, even as trash as Secret Rings' gameplay is, at the very least, I can still admire its attempt at basically incorporating the characters into a story, and actually doing a pretty good job of retaining the essence of each character in the writing.
Another pointless conflict is about to begin.
So for this fight, we have a couple of clones. Obviously, we want to attack the real Zor though, and we have to basically toggle the lights to be able to find out. Have I mentioned that the air control isn't the best in this game?
Pointless conflict is about to begin.
Oftentimes it's actually surprisingly easy to fall into a pit after a homing attack.
Wins in the end.
Alright, let's go over here, grab this extra life, and head to Sky Road, which is World 6. I don't really care for Sky Road, and it should be obvious why. It's basically just Windy Hill again. We have some gimmicks later on that help to set it apart, and obviously we'll be fighting Zavok, given that he's the only one we haven't fought yet. But it does feel very underwhelming for the penultimate area in the game to just have essentially a repeat of an earlier stage. Though don't worry, this does also use other assets from other stages as well, so it's not all like Windy Hill. I want to say Windy Valley for a moment, but that's Sonic Adventure. Yeah, we're reusing a lot of concepts from earlier in the game, which again, definitely... What happened there was, I thought the dash panel was automated there. I actually lost enough speed to the point where holding up actually did count as a direction. I thought I could basically hold up because I was trying to get ready for another thing in the future, but because of the dash panel wearing off, I just careened off the ledge. So again, sometimes the physics in this game can feel a little inconsistent. This also feels very Mario Galaxy with the giant worms in Gusty Garden, to be honest, which again, this game does feel like it copies a lot from Galaxy, but I do feel like a lot of the criticisms in that regard are a little overblown because the game, for better or worse, does have a lot of original aspects as well, though a lot of them don't necessarily land. It is nice to see a lot of classic enemies coming back though, given that a lot of these enemies really haven't been present in the 3D era of the series up to this point. So it's actually cool seeing reimaginings of like the caterpillar enemies from Sonic 1, though these are obviously a lot bigger in this case. We also have the kick move. To be honest, I keep forgetting to actually use it. I don't know how effective it would be, like if that also charges up with the homing attack charge, or if that only affects the actual homing attack. I genuinely don't have an answer for that. we have another on-rail section here. We also have like 30 plus lives, so we should be good for the rest of this game. We won't have to worry about like having to grind for lives, but again, in the Wii U release, I imagine that might be a problem a little bit, especially if you're trying to go after red rings, because you can easily run out of lives if you want the red rings. Again, I also feel like the lower animal requirements are also really nice in this version. We have plenty to unlock the next world, I'm pretty sure, or we'll get enough to unlock the next world by the time we're done here. But I'm pretty sure the final animal requirement in the Wii U version is like something absurd, like several thousand, rather than being like 2,000 in this version. So again, for that reason, I do feel like the PC version is inherently better, and also having more robust controller support, and you're only missing things like a couple of carnival mini-games where you have to use the gamepad to like pop balloons to get animals and things like that aren't particularly exciting in the first place, so it's not really a huge loss in my opinion. And again, it's mostly filler anyway, so again. Also with the shutdown of the Wii U eShop and 3DS eShop at that, there's not really an official way to play the Wii U version or 3DS version anymore unless you buy a physical copy, and those have actually gone up in price. And to be honest, I don't think this game is worth a lot. I think this game is worth maybe like a $7 Steam sale price, but I don't really recommend it at like full price because it is so hit and miss. Basically, some people... As I was about to say, some people find this game really fun. Alright, third time's the charm. Some people find this game really fun, and other people find it very insufferable, and even in terms of the gameplay. So again, it's so hit or miss to the point where I definitely feel like I wouldn't recommend paying a ton for this game. Though to be fair, I'm pretty sure the PC version isn't that expensive to begin with. Like, I want to say the normal price for it is like 20 or 30, so it's really not that bad. Over here, we have a little, like, turtle-looking mech with a cannon. We have to basically jump into the missiles by bouncing off the clouds in order to actually send them back at the robot. So this isn't overly difficult, obviously. It's just kind of time-consuming having to wait for it to actually attack. But other than that, this isn't terribly challenging. I assume it'll be one more missile, given that most games tend to operate in sets of 3. That's actually not good. We actually barely made that cycle, and we're good to go. So now we have to make our way over to the spring on the other side. Again, the time limits for these missions are very generous, and when you actually change it from seconds to real time, or like minute display, using this mod, it really shows how much time you really have, and it is often overkill compared to how short the actual levels are. But again, in the 3DS version, I've heard those stages get very long, but the time limits are also like half an hour to compensate, so... Again, I have never played the 3DS version, but I've heard plenty of stories to the point where I never felt like I was missing out as someone who also didn't really care for the console version at that. So it's not really a case of like generations where it's like, yeah, one version is clearly better than the other. Both versions have problems, except the 3DS version is arguably, possibly worse in some regards. So again, I never really felt inclined to go through it.
If we don't find your friend, can I be your sidekick?
What? Shut up! What kind of question is that?
I didn't mean anything by it. I just thought it might be better to work for you than Eggman.
Hello, I'm sitting right here, you know.
Orbot, no matter what happens, I won't fail again. I will save Tails.
It's stuff like that that makes me want to be your sidekick. Tails is lucky.
Seriously, I'm right here. I can still hear you.
Alright, next time we'll try to make our way through the rest of Sky Road and see what lies beyond this area. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Sonic Lost World.